You're listening to One Family, What's God Doing? Where we explore what God is doing in YWAM locations in Virginia and beyond. We can't wait for you to hear what God is doing today. Welcome back to What's God Doing? And if you've been watching, you know we've had the privilege of hearing from several Liberty University students and alumni, others in Lynchburg, because God's doing a lot in the Lynchburg area. And so I'm excited to meet Daphne. Daphne and I have never met before. So I get to hear what God's doing alongside you. So Daphne, it's great to meet you. And I got a question for you. What's God doing?
Hi. Yeah, it's so good to be here. I've listened to a little bit of the podcast. I'm also just pretty involved with YWAM Lynchburg. So it's pretty exciting to see the inner works of Virginia area. But yeah, I'm a Liberty student. I'm currently a junior, double majoring in criminal justice and psychology. And I am pretty involved with YWAM Lynchburg. They do a college ministry. We do a family dinner type Bible study. And then we also do worship bi-weekly and just kind of outreach in the community. And then I'm also involved with our 6 a.m. prayer group on Liberty campus where we do prayer and intercession. I help lead some of the prayer points every now and then, worship, but then also just involved as a family there. So that's kind of where I sit lifestyle-wise now. Yeah.
And, you know, going to Liberty, there is already this expectation of spiritual engagement. But it sounds like God's invited you to go above and beyond. Because, I mean, you're majoring in psychology and criminal justice. Those aren't small things. It could be very easy for those to fill up your time with studying and classes. But here you are going to these worship times, going to these dinners, and waking up extra early to go to a 6 a.m. prayer.
100%.
And so, you know, how did you feel like God was inviting you to give what somebody would say is your precious college time? And why have you seen that being a valuable use of your time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I am also a part of the marching band here on campus. And
so a whole lot of time.
So I am definitely always busy, and I've always been busy my whole life. But my freshman year, I grew up in a household where my dad was a youth pastor. And I was on the inner works of ministry my whole entire life. And I decided my freshman year I would just be the consumer. I very much never knew what it was like to be on the receiving end of ministry without understanding the giving end. So I kind of took a year off. I'm not going to call it a sabbatical in any means. I definitely don't think I was as pursuant of the Lord through high school and going into my freshman year as I am now. But I think I needed to figure out my faith on my own without seeing all the inner works of ministry, which always has its ups and downs. So I definitely was already busy. And then going into my sophomore year, I came out of my freshman year that had a lot of heartache and a lot of brokenness from just relationships, friendships, all of that. And I just needed godly community. And I got invited to go to our 6 a.m. prayer. And I just started going, and again, was more on the consumer side in a sense. I didn't want to lead anything. I just didn't feel like it was my time yet. And with that, I started to gain more and more Christian community, and that excites me. I'm very much a people person. So seeing people and meeting people and then their values aligning with mine just helped us all grow closer to God. And that motivated me to wake up early. When I woke up early, it was time that I was already sleeping, but I didn't have planned for anything else. And there's never anything else scheduled at 6 a.m. That I had to disregard. And so I was able to start going, and I went pretty regularly. And then through that, I met some YWAM people and got invited to the Bible study. And through the grace of God, Tuesday nights are normally the night that I have free. And so I was able to start going to that, and I really just found my family. I go to college 17 and a half hours away from my home. So I'm from Minnesota, and so finding my family here just made me feel loved. And when you feel loved, you just gravitate toward that. And I just fell in love with it. And I think going into the spring semester last year, I started to take take up some more leadership roles. And through that, of course, there's more commitment. And I really started to see the Lord calling me back into leadership. Now I'm a leader in band. I'm a leader in prayer sets. I'm starting to do some not official leading through YWAM, but definitely kind of the veteran there now. And the Lord's really qualifying me. I wouldn't say that I was qualified, but he called me, and so he's qualifying me through his calling. So that's why I'm pretty invested, is because of the people and the Lord using them.
Yeah. And that's a real thing. This, having seen the inner workings of ministry and playing roles in that, and then having this understandable desire to like, I'm tired of being the one in charge or in the behind the scenes. I just want to receive and like not have to know what's planned or what I just want. But then this sense of God inviting you back is this really beautiful thing where it's clearly not coming from you or a desire to be in the spotlight or to be the leader, or it's just a willingness. And for that to be happening alongside a period of life that is already chock full of marching band and classes, it really demonstrates that this is about something bigger than just leading a ministry or engaging with a ministry, which, you know, it led me to think about how people can set these things into separate categories, right? So you're a college student, you're a university student, and you have these classes, and then, also like your faith, you know, and so you have this time period is when there's the prayer and the worship, and then you have the classes. But I imagine, just from what you've been describing, that God has been showing you more and more of what that integration looks like, that you being a student is not a separate identity in life from you being a spiritual being, but that your faith actually plays a role in learning about psychology and criminal justice.
Yeah. I think it's so huge in realizing how God's in everything. I very much think I grew up kind of separating everything. I had certain friends in certain circles, and that led to different things. But I think once I started really falling in love with the Lord, and I think once you do really fall in love with the Lord, you realize he's everywhere, and you can't help but find gratitude at everything. And that's just the coolest thing ever. You go for a walk and you see the Lord in the trees in the sky, and then you go to class. And right now I'm learning practically neuroscience, and I'm seeing how intricately we're made. And then you go to this other class and you realize how much the Lord loves the brokenhearted. And then you go to work out and you see how much everything, like the Lord is in everything. And you just have to acknowledge him for him to be like accepted into the environment. And that's the coolest thing, is when you acknowledge him, then you have a relationship with him and he's always with you.
Yeah, that's really good. And then, of course, you mentioned this reality that as you stepped in, you discovered the other things that God had for you that you didn't even know you needed as deeply as you needed, primarily that community, being so far from home. But the important, we were designed for community. And now it's become a deep part of how you spend your time and how you function, is connecting with these people that years ago you didn't even know.
For sure. Big thing was that I made the community on my own, and I was able to be independent, kind of like how we talked about like my past and my family being so involved in ministry. I think seeing that, when you see ministry from the back end, and you probably have seen this, you see all the nitty gritty, realizing that pastors are still humans, realizing that we all have sin and all of this, and that leads to so much. I guess like for me, it led me to kind of push away the church in a sense, because I saw how much hurt there was in the back end. But then to kind of build that community on my own and not be put into this church because my dad works there. Not saying that my church that my dad works at is not good. It's an amazing church. But just kind of making those decisions on my own and allowing myself to be in environments where I can kind of speak for myself and not speak on behalf of my family, I think really helped push that community. And now that community is where I feel the most comfortable and safe and vulnerable, which is so good.
Yeah. So all of this stuff is coming from this willingness to make time for God. Let's say that there's someone listening that just feels like there is no time. I've got my schedule is so packed and there's so many things I have to do and I just don't have any energy. You know, what you're saying is that it's actually worth making the effort. So how would you encourage someone who's in that place that feels like they don't have the capacity or don't know how to do it?
What I recommend is what I've been doing for about a year and a half, which is a Sabbath, which is rest. And I started reading through the Old Testament a couple years ago, just chronological order, maybe not consecutive, but chronologically. And I just saw the Lord putting so much emphasis on rest. And as a very busy person, schedule out 12-hour days, I realized that I needed to rest. I personally found that I rest the most with the Lord by taking out my Saturdays and saying I can't do any classwork, I can't do any work, typically no housework, things like that, and just finding peace in the presence of the Lord and the people that the Lord blessed me with. I know some people feel like they don't have the luxury to do that. I know part of that is they feel like they can't get everything done, but that just shows the beauty of how much we need to rely on the Lord. The Lord kind of shows through Sabbathing that I'm making that into a verb now. That's funny. But the Lord...
Go for it. Sabbathing.
On Sabbath, that you can be productive for those 6 days and really discipline yourself and then take that day of rest. But even if you don't have that full day, just taking out 15 minutes, staying up 15 minutes before you go to bed and just sitting with the Lord and not just reading your Bible, not just worshiping Him. That is amazing and it's so good to do and it's so edifying, but also just being in His presence and knowing, like for me, when I get the most busy, I kind of close off my emotional side and being vulnerable with God and telling Him like, hey, like this happened today and I really felt hurt from this, or I feel angry about this, or I feel frustrated, or I was really excited about this, and just talk to Him like He's a normal person. Even though He knows everything, being vulnerable with Him, it also allowed me to be vulnerable with myself and find the times where I'm like, oh, wow, I really do need to slow down and just be with the Lord and let Him guide me. And so if you can Sabbath, that would be my high recommend. But I also would say just spending time with Him in those moments and then integrating that into your conversations. So being like, oh, I was with the Lord earlier and He really showed me this. And that really excites your conversations with other people and it invites Him into the busyness and not just into the rest. Yeah.
And I think you're right. Sabbath is a uniquely beautiful way to practice trusting God because, you know, one of the passages I really love in Scripture is the one about manna. And God gave instructions about, I'm going to provide for you. And here's what you need to do. You go out, but don't take more than a day's worth. Don't stockpile it. Don't get greedy. Because if you do that, the extra stuff's going to rot. Trust me each day. But then He changes the reality of those rules for the Sabbath. Because this manna that expires after a day, it has a 1-day shelf life. He's like, but on the day before the Sabbath, actually gather for 2 days. And it's actually going to last longer. Yeah. And it's beautiful because I think, you know, you're speaking to people who may be saying, I love what you're saying, but you just don't understand. I really can't. And we have this opportunity to trust two very real realities. One, you might not actually be able to. You might actually have too much stuff to do. It may be impossible to take that time. And this other reality that takes faith, that what's impossible with man is possible with God. Yeah. And it sounds like what you're inviting everyone to is just try it. Try it for, you know, 1 Sabbath, 2 Sabbaths. Try it for a month and see what happens. And what you're saying is you with these intense majors, this marching band, this course load, 17 and a half or whatever hours, like it somehow is working. Like somebody could find the same thing to be true for them. Yeah. Feel the fruitfulness.
I agree.
Well, as we draw to a close, is there a verse that God's been putting on your heart lately that you want to share?
I would definitely say that there's a verse that the Lord puts on my heart constantly that I love to share because I feel like it slightly gets skipped over in a sense. Isaiah 40:26. I feel like most people start right afterward talking about soaring on wings like eagles, which is amazing. But Isaiah 46 talks about the stars, and says, "Look up into the heavens, who created all these? He brings them out like an army, one after another, calling each by its name. Because of his great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing." And it just really talks about how the Lord knows each of us by name, that he created all of us because he's so powerful and worthy and incomparable. He doesn't forget any of us. And just remembering that the Lord loves each of us individually. And I just feel like it's so beautiful.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that, and for sharing, just this reality that God is inviting us to make time for him. He gave us the time in the first place, but that he's inviting us to do that, and that it actually can be really fruitful. And thank you as well for being willing to serve when in your humanity there are times where you're like, I just want to receive, whether it's through the prayer or through stepping up in some ways within the YWAM Lynchburg location. I'm really grateful for your willingness to serve. Thank you. And thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank all of you for joining us as we together learn what it means to know God and make him known. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of One Family, What's God Doing? If you'd like to learn more about what God's doing in Virginia, visit us at ywamva.org and join us next week for more stories of God at work.